Hello everyone, I've got a pretty big update for you today. I'm sorry it took so long. I was sick from the end of November to the end of March, I had some job schedule changes, and I keep figuring out how to do new stuff. Every time I thought I was ready to start recording, I figured out how to do something that I had just got done saying that I didn't know how to do yet. Big shout out to Chris Purnell, aka Arlana. They've been a massive help with figuring everything out. But anyways, on to the update. I'm reading off a script again because there's a lot to go over. I'm still working on my big enemy project. Until this point, I've mostly kept everything a secret, and you may not want to watch this video if you want absolutely no spoilers for my projects. But it just keeps snowballing into something bigger and better, far beyond modding just the enemies. I've learned how to do some things that I think are too important to keep a secret any longer. Some people already know some of this from the Rifts Discord, but here goes. I've learned how to mod on PlayStation 3. I've been able to do many texture mods and it works and looks great. The process is very lengthy compared to normal modding though, so I haven't done as much testing with it, but it stands to reason that I could be able to do a lot of what I'm doing on PC. With this in mind, while I believe Fluffy Quack is much more interested in the RE engine, if an ArcTool batch file is ever made for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Switch, I don't see why it wouldn't be possible to make mods available to everyone. I just hope Capcom doesn't get too upset with me given somewhat recent events. Let's see here. I've finally figured out how to add brand new equipment to the game, which is huge, really excited. And with whatever free time I've had, I've been adding lots of new things to the game, ranging from my own ideas to making modded pieces of equipment that have existed for some time on Nexus their own piece of equipment. This means we no longer have to sacrifice existing, equipment. I've been able to fully map out how to add it, and most of it is done by editing files, but it's a little different with the icons. They're hard-coded, so I need to use Cheat Engine to assign them. When I'm all done making new equipment and making and assigning the icons, I'll have to get a tool written like what I did with the Berserk equipment to lock it in place so that people don't have to load it every time with Cheat Engine. Arlana is actually already working on this. I'm inserting this into my script because I forgot to put that, but anyway. One thing that's nice about this is that I can actually make my own icons and tell the game to load it. This opens up the opportunity for customization, which is really nice. It's taking some time though, because the examine icons, where you press details on PlayStation 3, it's square, for instance, they're way easier to add than the normal icons that you'd see just in your inventory or the storage. At first, I was only going to worry about the examine icons, but once I learned how to assign the normal ones, it opened up the possibility of adding more custom ones. I'll be able to use this not to only make my own for new custom items, but I can create some separate ones for stuff in the vanilla game. It just opens up a lot of opportunities. For instance, it uses the same icon for every wolf-styled cape, so I can make a distinction between the feral cape and the direwolf cape. Or one thing that's in the game that I think was like a small oversight, the sword Ardent Will, it has the model of a warblade, but it uses the icon for the steel greatsword, so I could potentially fix that. I'm also able to assign names and descriptions, and it's been a ton of fun coming up with my own. Some of them need some work, but I feel like I'm doing a decent job. I try really hard to make it sound like something that was already in the game, kind of keep it lore friendly, etc. This one right here is actually one of my favorites that I've come up with. I call it the Bandit's Two-Hander. I've really liked the way that the Bandit's, two-hander looked in-game, and I had this idea to retexture it a long time ago, but I don't like replacing existing equipment, but now I can make retextures their own separate unique things. It's really all mapped out now. I have figured out how to add things, how to give them custom stats, and even to a small degree, custom effects. I've been able to add them to quests, shops, treasure chests, gather spots, and enemy drops, and most recently, I learned how to add upgrade paths to them. It's been fun coming up with what upgrade materials I think should be used for the equipment. I had wanted to make a tutorial for the community once I got this all figured out, but I will need some time to make the tutorial because it's a pretty long and complex process that I'm not really sure a lot of people will be interested in doing. I had meant to kind of collaborate in a way with the community, but I think I'll need to change how I do things. I was thinking what I want to try and do is get permission to port people's ideas and mods into the game natively with this method. That way there aren't a ton of different mods that conflict with each other, because you got a bunch of different equipment pieces in the same slots, so to speak, varying from mod to mod. But yeah, another thing is, at the time of writing this, Dragon's Dogma 2 will be out very soon, and will definitely be out by time this video is published. I've had this video planned for several months, but as I mentioned earlier, I kept putting it off for one reason or another. It's become very clear that the sequel will be out before I finish my project, and as much as I want to have everything done before the sequel arrived, to give everyone something to play with while they were waiting, that's not going to happen. So I guess my next goal will be to have more of my projects done by the time everyone wants to return to Grancis again. I actually think that would be a really fun event. I know there's no multiplayer for Dragon's Dogma yet, so it'd be a bit different than the community events held by the Soul series, but I can still see it happening. Side note from the future, Dragon's Dogma 2 is out now, and I have been playing it non-stop, which is another reason this video is taking so long. I've been binging it as much as my free time allows, and I've been loving it. Something that's really cool is that there are a ton of ideas I've had that I've been working on modding into DDDA that are actually in DD2. It's really cool to see so many ideas I've had and so many things I've wanted to do actually show up in the sequel. Side note, I've looked through some textures, and though similar, most if not all that I've gone through haven't been exactly the same, so unfortunately I can't full on replace things like I had been hoping. However, if we ever get custom models available for Dragon's Dogma 1, I had the idea to take the designs of weapons and armor from 2 and implement them as what I'd like to call masterwork versions of the equipment. For instance, there would be the Dark Arisen version of the broadsword and the sequel's version, and it'd be called the Masterwork Broadsword. I had the idea to not only make it a cosmetic thing, but the Masterwork versions of equipment would have higher stats. I was thinking they'd either be a better in-between of existing equipment, or I might make it so that the Masterwork Broadsword, for instance, is as strong as the Devil's Bane for those who want to use the appearance of lower tier equipment, but don't want to sacrifice on stats. Moving along to the next part. For all of you waiting for my big enemy project, I wanted to touch base on the main reasons it's taking so long. I would stop watching the video here if you don't want any spoilers. Just gonna give you a minute. Okay, spoiler. Alright, so there are two main things keeping me from finishing the enemy project. And I don't believe the project would be complete without these adjustments. For starters, any of you who are familiar with the game may have noticed that any NPC-type enemies are strangely easy to kill. By NPC-type enemies, I mean enemies that are either literally NPCs that you can attack, or bosses that are NPCs, such as Salamet, the Seneschal, etc. I discovered the reason for this a couple years ago, and haven't figured out a solution. The problem is that for some reason, all NPCs that are marked as NPCs are locked to 1000 HP. The game does make the distinction between enemies and NPCs, in case you guys were confused, because technically everything's an NPC, but that's not you. But anyway, for instance, bandits that you'd fight out in the open are considered enemies, and they have a limit of 10 on the screen at any given time. That's kind of how you can tell. But Maul's bandits, the ones you can actually talk to within the ruins of Ernst's castle, are considered NPCs, and they have a limit of 30 on the screen. This causes an issue. You may think the solution would be just to increase their defense, but because of how Dragon's Dogma does defense, that solution has two problems. If I simply increase defense, Lower level players using regular means with which to fight will find themselves doing around 1 HP of damage per hit, and the fights will be dragged on for far too long. The other problem is the enemy will still die really easy once you meet their defense threshold. This would mean they would still die in a few hits the moment you're strong enough to damage them, and unless I boosted defenses very high, they'd still get one shot by something like a throw blast. I can actually demonstrate this by fighting the Duke. Many know him to be very strong and might think he has a ton of HP, but this is because all of his stats have a base and are multiplied by 200 in his spawn point file, including his health. However, the HP part does not work like it does for enemies, and he's locked to 1000 HP. So the moment I can break his threshold or hit him with something he's weak to like Demon's Wrath, it takes him out instantly. Part of my project involves making NPC enemy type fights better by boosting their health and in some cases their other stats a little. I really think all of those kinds of fights would be more interesting if they didn't end in 1 or 2 hits, though unfortunately I am hindered by one more limitation. NPCs use the same type of health system that the player has, which means they're limited to a max of 9,999 HP. This isn't very high, but I think nearly 10 times the normal amount of health will still make a difference in these fights, at least for a little while. You'll still destroy enemies like this when you're max level, of course, but I think it'll lend more challenge and interesting fights to the early game. The second thing keeping me from finishing the project is a big one. I'll try not to give away too many spoilers in explaining this, but it'll be a little difficult, and many can probably guess what I'm doing from the info that I'll give here. So basically, I need to be able to create another stage. This is very easy with closed off stages like Cassardus and the Blue Moon Tower, etc. But to create a stage like Grancis' open world is posing a problem. Grancis is an all-one model or a couple of models that can easily be put together like every other stage is. It's hundreds of parts put together. My project won't be complete until I figure out how to create a duplicate of the Grancis map for purposes of an idea I've had in the works for years. But the problem is that I keep falling through into a void when I go to test the stage, and I have no idea why. I don't know if it's because I've done something wrong, if it's because I need to connect all of the hundreds of stage pieces for it to work in the first place, or if there's something else I'm missing. But once that's figured out, I'll be well on my way to finishing the big project, as that's the most major holdup to one of the most major parts of the mod. And that's the basic gist of things. It's all of it in a nutshell. I don't want to give too much away or bore you guys with too much info, but know that I've got huge plans for Dark Arisen, even if the sequel is already out. And I really hope you guys enjoy my mods as I release them. I'm sorry they take so long. Hopefully the sequel can keep everyone entertained while I work. That's all for now, even if I want to share so much more. Thanks for watching and listening. Have a good one, everyone.